Why hello everyone, it's I, Wacky Anime What If, here to present you with part 8 of What If Issei was betrayed and got sea monster powers. Let's get into it. Issei has just awoken. He looks around and he notices he's still in chains, but he's in much more chains than before. He's wrapped in layers on layers of chains all around his body. The golden chains are even coming out of his body. They're wrapping all around him. He can even feel them tightening around into his organs, digging into his skin. They're everywhere in his body. A single ounce of mana will tighten these chains and rip him apart. He can already tell how they operate, because when he tried to circulate mana through his body or any of his power, it immediately tightened slightly, as if it was warning him before it ripped him apart. And Issei looks around the room, and they made a lot of precautions, he notes, because he sees turrets with arrows. The arrows are the exact arrows that you slay gods with. They're known as the god-slaying arrows, or mythos. When you are pierced by them, you will fall. There is no resurrection, there is no healing them. Those are ancient weapons that were thought to be lost in time. And he looked upwards and he sees there's over 20 different security cameras in all areas of the room. And there are 20 guards outside of his vicinity. He could hear it with his hearing. He even heard a few of them mutter, "That kid, he's not going to be able to get out at all. He's a weakling, honestly. I didn't sense a single thing of mana from him." And the other guard said that's because there's mana restrictions on him. He could probably blow all of us up to fucking hell. Well, we're in hell. We'd probably go to super hell. And they start chuckling to each other. While Issei merely just says, "You know, you almost had everything right." He thinks this in his mind. But they forgot magic-proof items. And they didn't really pat me down perfectly. And Issei merely just moves around. And as soon as he moves around, bells start ringing because the chains are attached to walls and everywhere around the room, connected. And they have chains around each. The chains have bells around each of them, alerting the owner of the chains that Issei has awoken. Issei merely hears 5 footsteps walking down the stairs into the dungeon, 500 meters below the conference room, and then he sees the 5 footsteps stop in front of his door, and he sees one Konako open the door and close it behind her. And she ends up looking at Issei and seeing him in a sorry state, because he's bleeding from almost every orifice. All of his flesh is coming out. She can almost see the insides of Issei's skin, because the chains are tugging away at him, because Issei was circulating magic. But Konako doesn't know why, since he's smart enough to know that if he circulates too much, then the chains will rip him apart. But they'll find out shortly of why he was doing so. Konako merely walks up towards Issei and says, "You know, you were very stupid for trusting me. After all, why would I go against my master? Even though I do feel bad for you, I won't go against her just because of some lonely loser who has no one that loved them. Your daddy and mommy didn't even care about you. And that's quite sad. At least I had a sister to care for me, even though I didn't really want her to." Konako merely says, as if enlisting a fact, which made Issei not angry at all. He merely smiled at this. And Konako was creeped out by this. She said, "Why are you smiling?" And Issei said, "Because I already knew what you were like. And I don't think you will be able to suspect what's going to happen next." And once Issei says this, Rias and everyone behind the door barge in. Rias, Makio, And the crippled Devil King himself, Sir Zex, walks in, missing an entire arm, holes riddled into him like he was Swiss cheese, and consistently bleeding out the mouth, but still able to get up and go down there. Quite admirable is what Issei says, that you're able to stand up and look me in the eyes after what I did to you. Maybe I should have been a little bit harder on you. Maybe I should have removed that little pecker you have down there, so you can't say that you're a man, because you're a disgrace of one, using these cowardly tactics against me. Sir Zex merely looks at Issei with fury in his eyes and screams, "I'm gonna fucking kill you. Makil, end him now before something happens." And then he just says, "Oh, something's already happened." A slip of paper falls from his pocket, and a summoning circle appears. And all of a sudden, a violent wave of energy comes through the summoning circle. And Loki emerges, Kokoville emerges, and tons of devils and fallen angels emerge from right outside the Grimmery residence. And Issei merely laughs and says, "You really thought you could actually capture me?" And Issei just says, "Oh, also, I let you capture me. I could break from these chains right now. Because, yes, these can hold those mythical beings, but you forget one thing. I have more hatred." And black flames burst out from the chains, out of his body, going through the chains. All of them start melting. They start shattering. And they set ablaze the entire cell, because the chains that were attached to the walls start setting ablaze. The walls are on fire. Everyone's trying to get escape from the hell flames, which is Issei's rage. And Issei merely laughs. Koneko looks in dismay. And Rias tries to fire her destruction magic, but she's stabbed in the back by Koneko. Koneko punches her hand straight through Rias' chest. Her eyes were completely blank, and Issei says, "Nice job, puppet." "Koneko, you thought you could play me as a fool, but you were the fool all along. You thought you could be the puppeteer and I could be the puppet, but it was the other way around. That little power-up you got, that wasn't a power-up. That was to make you into a puppet that I can command and control to my will." And Koneko is on the inside screaming that she just killed the one person who saved her from the darkness, Rias. She screams in her mind, while on the outside she's completely cold and blank and unsympathetic as she shoved her hand straight through her chest and ripped out her heart with no empathy. And while Rias was falling down, thinking that she was betrayed by her comrade and couldn't hear a thing that Issei said, Issei instructed Koneko, while Rias still breathes, rip her head off, which Koneko does without mercy. Her hands start growing cat claws, and she puts her hand straight above Rias' head and yanks it off. And Sir Zex is there just witnessing this. He's trying to escape because he knows he's powerless. He only came to gloat and to execute Issei and watch all of this unfold and show that he's superior still, and maybe to attain the boosted gear and become the goddamn Lucifer again. But no, this was much more than he expected. While he's trying to run, Issei merely says, "Hey Loki, want to play a little fun trick?" Loki looks at him and smiles, and Issei says, "Use the illusion magic on him." Uses illusion magic on Sir Zex, but Sir Zex didn't notice. He runs out of the cell, runs down the hall, goes all the way up up the stairs. And once he gets out and is in his main estate, he runs all the way into the meeting room and screams for help. But once he sees where he is, once he opens the meeting room doors, he notices he's right back in the cell where Issei is. And Issei is just merely sitting in the middle of the cell in a chair. And says, "Oh, it didn't take you that long to come crawling back to me, now did it?" And Sir Zex is terrified. He looks behind him and still sees Issei in a chair. And Issei starts walking towards him. And Sir Zex looks behind him and he still sees Issei walking towards him. Anywhere he looks, he sees multiple Isseis now. He sees 4 of them closing in on him and circling him, all firing up the boosted gears and going into their scale mail armor, the balance breaker, the original one, and all charging directly into him. And Sir Zex is merely crying. He's begging for his life. He's on the ground kneeling all the way. And no, nothing. He doesn't feel any impact or anything. He looks up and thinks he might have survived. But once he looks up, everything disappears. It was all an illusion. And Sir Zex is in front of Issei. And Issei just says, "It didn't take you that long. It only took you about 10 minutes for you to be begging for mercy. But there's one bad thing. Mercy is something I'm all out of." And he grabs Sir Zex by the head. He gets his balance breaker wings out. And he flies out from under the estate and punches straight through the ground all the way up out of the Reese estate. He punches straight upwards, punches straight through the Reese estate, flies up into the air, and screams in the air, amplifying his voice with the boosted gear, and saying, "This is your Devil King. This is your Lucifer. And this is his end." He throws him in the air, and he says, "Boosted shot." A ball of energy appears in his hand, and he says, "Magnetic crush." And the ball of energy turns black with purple lightning coming out of it, and crimson aura all circulating around it, crimson wind around the lightning, and he fires it into the air. It heads straight towards Sir Zex. Sir Zex is in the air, falling downwards, and looks right behind him just to see this ball of energy heading towards him. And Sir Zex tries to block it with his one remaining hand, but all it does is, once it touches his hand, it goes to dust. Everything goes to dust. He starts to deteriorate from just one mere touch of it, and you could hear a loud explosion. Nothing is left of Sir Zex. There isn't even an ounce of magic left. There isn't an ounce of his presence left. Even though he was crippled, his mana was crippled, he was still a devil. He had superior strength, is what everyone thought, because he was a Lucifer. But that didn't save him. That blast didn't merely kill him. That blast obliterated him. And the sky changed. The sky changed into a dark, pitch black. And Issei says, I think I should probably end things really quickly. Because that one attack didn't just mean to kill, wasn't just meant to kill Lucifer. It's meant to kill every devil here. And he says, now, obliterate the sky, the earth, the heavens, and the world itself. The dragon of the sky, the emperor of the heavens, the sacred hydra of the water and the sea, come down. And a giant hydra comes out of the pitch black sky with tons of water flooding everywhere. And Issei merely panting after doing this because it unleashed majority of his mana. He's at a basis to where even a low-ranked devil can kill him right now. So he merely tells Loki telepathically to go ahead and get him out of here. which Loki teleports behind him and touches Issei, putting a teleportation seal back to his base. Issei's back at the base and he lays down onto the couch in front of him. I say lay down, but he collapsed, to be exact. Meanwhile, the Hydra, which is coming down upon all of the devils in the Reis estate, the whole entire underworld, is flooded with water. And it is a joyous occasion for Loki and Kokaville and everyone else, but it's also a scary one. The Hydra, with all of its heads, aiming everywhere, firing its fire everywhere. One of them is controlling the water itself into spikes and piercing every devil in front of them. There's 7 devils that tried to rush towards each of the heads, but all the heads did was just snap back and bite down on their heads and rip them off, and merely spit them out directly at other devils, shooting the heads at such a velocity and speed that once it hit their chest, it exploded on impact. And all that was left was a bloody mess. And the Hydra, it didn't stop with just this. While the underworld was being flooded, all the flames in hell were gone, doused out by the Hydra's water. The Hydra controls water, flames, electricity, and many more that most people did not know. This Hydra was much different from normal Hydras, because Issei summoned it with majority of his mana, and him being technically a Hydra himself, managed to summon something completely outrageous, something that was out of his pure Hydra blood, coursing through his veins. The blood of the Hydra King that's in his veins created this monstrosity. It was tearing the devil race down. Everyone was trying to run, but they knew they couldn't. Majority of people drowned. And Konako, who was still in the Reis estate, looking at the corpse of Reis Grimmery, who she had just killed, looked upwards and noticed that there was a dragon head right in front of her, ripping through the Reis estate, the Grimmery estate, and staring down at her. And she knows she's going to die. She screams out, "Why? Why? Why?" And the Hydra says, "This is your own undoing. You messed with a being that you should not have messed with." And all 8 of the heads gather in one place, and they all start firing electricity, fire, water, and one of them starts firing ice. All of them combine together and shoot at Konako. In a beam of light, she disappears. It obliterated her, leaving nothing. No remains, nothing. The whole Reis Grimmery estate, the whole Grimmery estate, Reis's corpse, everything was gone. It looked as if there was a clean plot of land there before it was covered by all the water that was going around the underworld itself. And the Hydra merely gets desummoned afterwards, because Issei, when he summoned the Hydra, he only had one wish: to destroy the underworld itself. And that was fulfilled. And everyone else that was in the meeting escaped throughout the entire chaos, going to their own factions. Issei is still asleep on the couch. Everyone went all the way back into, their base of operations. Issei has now been asleep for about 7 days after the event happened. But it's because he's still undergoing a metamorphosis. His skin is starting to turn scale-like like a Hydra, but his eyes are about as mysterious as they can be. His eyes are completely orange, with a hint of red, and a lot of mystery in it. And his hair has grown longer, all the way down to his feet. And he just looks terrifying. If you stare at him for too long, his mere aura now, even when he's unconscious, will obliterate you from existence. Issei has transcended past a Hydra Leviathan, not on Cthulhu's level, but almost there. Or so Issei thinks. But he's going to be in for a rude awakening. As when Issei recovers, he goes outside of his base. He wants to test out his powers, but he notices something really odd. There's a figure heading towards his base, and Issei is wondering if it's from one of the factions, so he gets in fighting position, already about to throw a heap of magic towards him, specifically his flames of hatred towards him. But the guy merely puts up his hands and says, "Hey, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you something." And Issei merely says, "What are you here to tell me? And if you try to do anything hostile or try to trick me or anything, it won't end well for you. Just so you know." So what was it you're about to tell me? You're not going to try to sell me something like a car dealer, right? And the guy merely chuckles and says, "Oh, no, I'm not. I'm here to tell you that all the other factions have currently submitted to you. They do not want to die. You may command them at any moment. We just want peace. We do not want to deal with you. You can create your own faction. You can do anything you want. Please leave all of them out of it. I'm their messenger. Also, I'm a human, by the way. Because, honestly, they were way too scared to bring any angels, fallen angels, or any of them on the means of upsetting you, since you've had bad experiences with all of them." And Issei says, "Oh, I've also had bad experiences with humans, though." He merely says, the messenger starts to sweat, and says, "What bad experiences?" And Issei says, "Oh, well, my human parents abandoned me. Also, Asya, who was previously human, pretty much abandoned me too. But I don't resent her that badly. Well, not bad enough to kill her, maybe torture her." He merely says, with his face not changing at all, just in a joyful, playful manner, which the messenger is really odded out about, because they heard he was highly aggressive, is what the messenger heard, at least, from everyone. The messenger merely just says, "I'm just their messenger. Okay? So, whatever you do, please leave me out of it. Just leave me out of it." And Issei merely says, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I cannot." And he just chops the guy's head off immediately. Rushes him, chops his head off, and picks it up. And he puts the spike right outside of their base and places the head right in front of it. Right on top of it, to be exact, on top of the spike. Facing outwards. So if you ever try to walk towards his base, you see the head there. And he places a sign next to it saying, "Beware, beware. I will not hesitate to obliterate you all." And Issei merely just says, "I think this is going to go well." Issei walks directly into his base, and from there on, Issei has continuously conquered all the factions. Really, no one stood a chance before him. Issei is literally the embodiment of hatred at this point. Even though all of them have died, all the people who betrayed him have died, he's still angry. He's still murderous, and he's very aggressive. To the point where he flooded the world up with his hatred. When his mana rose to its peak after he killed all the faction leaders, he made a wave of mana that shook the whole world's balance. The ocean started to overflow and went across the world, and mythical beings started to rise, and certain seals started to break. The seals that held Leviathan, Hydra, and Cthulhu all broke simultaneously, leaving monsters to rule the world. Mostly, all three of them, and Issei Hyodo, known as the King of the Monsters, by all. Well, all who still live. The only survivors, really, were people that had boats or people who were on boats at the time. There was only about 100,000 humans left in the population, but they all died out mere centuries after Issei's rule. And Issei cannot age any longer. He cannot die, he cannot really do anything anymore, except for keep his hatred bottled up inside of him for all eternity. And this is how I end What If Issei Was Betrayed and Got Sea Monster Powers. This is ending 1. I'll have a second alternative ending.